What's happening, friends? Welcome back to Dynamo DeFi. My name is Patrick, and on this channel I talk about cryptocurrency, decentralized finance, and economics. Everybody in crypto tells you to do your own research, but very few people talk about how to do your own research. In today's video, I'll go through some sites and resources that I like to use to find new DeFi projects, and then also a few quick tips that you can use when you're evaluating these new projects, and hopefully this can help some of you find some small DeFi gems. And finally, I'll remind you before we start that although I'm going to go through a few projects myself in this video, nothing I say suggests that you should or shouldn't invest in these projects. You should, as I'll teach you how to, do your own research. With that being said, let's get into the video. The first website that I like to use to find new DeFi projects is Defi Llama. And if you've watched this channel or other DeFi channels, you're probably familiar with Defi Llama. Defi Llama shows the total value locked across different protocols and different chains. And total value locked is basically either the liquidity or the money lent out or the money otherwise deposited into a protocol. And you can see that these range from being over $20 billion curve all the way down to tiny protocols that you'd have to go far down to see that have sometimes even tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. So very small. And the way that I like to use Defi Llama is I usually start by going to the chain section. And this will show you a consolidated view of the total value locked and percent change for different chains. So we have Ethereum, of course, we have Terra Luna, we have Binance Smart Chain, we have Avalanche, and so on, all the way down to chains that you probably haven't heard of because they only have sometimes, like I said, tens of thousands of dollars across the whole chain. By the way, interesting experience if you want to sort of understand the mentality of whales better is to just take a small amount of money and test out one of these chains, say even $100 or a couple $100 if you can spare it, and you'll understand some of the problems that whales face as far as liquidity and those things. If you have, for example, 1/1000th of the TVL on a chain. But that's beside the point. The way that I usually use this is either I'll sort of go through the top chains and find one that I'm not familiar with and say, okay, you know, suppose you didn't know Near. You might say, okay, well, Near's number 12. I'm not familiar with that. So let me dive into that and click into it and see some of the protocols on it. And then you can start looking through these. And even something like Near, not counting Aurora, there's only 5 protocols on here. So that's more than a reasonable amount for you to investigate all of them yourself. Or you could go down a bit further and say you wanted to investigate Elrond or something like that. But the way that I often find chains is what I'll do is I'll look for things that have positive growth at least on the 7-day and 1 month period. 1 day is even better, but definitely you want 7-day and 1 month because that shows that this chain has been consistently growing over at least 1 month and it's still growing. So I might filter by 7-day change, and Near has been growing significantly. Optimism, let's look at that one. Optimism is an Ethereum layer 2 solution, and it was rumored that they might have a token airdrop. So you can see that their TVL grew significantly over the past couple of days. But really, if we zoom out, it's been growing since mid-March, and before that it was somewhat flat for a while. But then you might dive into here and say, okay, there's 31 projects on this chain. And then you try to figure out, okay, which projects are driving the growth. Synthetics is a major project Uniswap is deployed on the chain, but then you might scroll down and say, okay, I'm not familiar with ZipSwap, but it's up 67% in TVL over the past 7 days, 27% today, but it's still only 13 million. So there's still certainly some room for growth. And then you might click in here. You'd see that the TVL was shrinking and then started to recover. And then you might go to the website and start to conduct your investigation further. So that's a way that I often like to use Defi Llama. And again, this isn't suggesting you do or don't invest in ZipSwap. It's just an example of how you might find a protocol that you'd want to investigate. Another website that I like to use is Token Terminal. Token Terminal is similar in some ways to Defi Llama, but it shows revenue. So you can filter to either blockchains or dApps. And so then you can see how much actual money different dApps are bringing in, because some of these dApps that have crazy TVL over here are not actually bringing in that much money. So a lot of times I'll look at this and again, I'll see, well, which ones are growing in 7 days. So So for example, looking at this revenue, I was able to catch some interesting things that were breaking out. For example, looks rare. Several weeks ago, I do a weekly thread on Twitter of the interesting stats that I find across all these websites, but I called out that looks rare revenue was starting to recover, and then the price sort of followed that. And you could go here and see some things that maybe you haven't heard of, but that have strong revenue growth, and start investigating those. Final place I like to go for these sorts of statistics-based analyses is CoinGecko, and I go to the DEX section. And I wish there was a better resource for this, but this is total volume traded on different decentralized exchanges. And this is really helpful because I think that volume is actually a better metric for exchanges than TVL is. And so, for example, this was part of the reason why I got so interested in the Cronos ecosystem, is I noticed that Finance was in the top 10, and it was actually top 2 at one point, yet people don't talk about it very much. Another one that you might call out is Orca, right? Orca's on Solana, and if you had been following this over a long period of time, you would have seen that Orca was below Serum, and then it flipped Serum in volume. So that means that it's sort of ascending to the top of the Solana ecosystem as far as trade volume. And then you could go down here again and find different decentralized exchanges. I've never heard of IDEX, but maybe you say, okay, well, that's comparable to Beethoven, which I have heard of, and it's comparable to the V1 of Balancer, which I have heard of, so maybe it's worth looking into. And this is just to find projects that you then look into. And not all these are going to be wins. Some of them will be losses, but it only takes 1 or 2 wins to really change your portfolio. And that's basically where I go to find the statistics-based leads. A few other places that are good. One website is apeoclock.com, and shout out to Grumpy Invests from my Telegram group for suggesting this one. I actually was not familiar with it. By the way, just made a Telegram group last week, totally free, but I'll include a link down below if you want to discuss some DeFi things or ask questions in there. I'm on there pretty regularly. But Ape O Clock basically has a calendar of different NFT and DeFi launches. So we could go down and say, okay, today is April 20th. Well, there's actually nothing for a few days. But then we have this one. Goldman Farm is launching in 3 days. I don't know anything about this project. I'm seeing it now for the first time. Morty Finance Liquidity, Hoocha Money. And you could say, today maybe you could find a bunch of projects that just launched. Some of these seem to get on here around the time that they launch without a ton of notice. But you could see that they launched and say, okay, well, I'm going to get in on the first day, or I'm going to wait for the first day dump, and then I'm going to get into these projects. And so it's just an interesting way that you can find new projects right when they launch. I mean, and not all of them will be winners, but maybe you catch the next Trader Joe or something like that. And you can actually even filter by chain on here. So I could, for example, go to Cronos, which I've been focusing on for my portfolio challenge, and see, okay, a new farm launched today. And I don't know anything about this, but I probably will check it out, right? And you can even go on here and you can see some other information. You can see the chart. You can see the audit or review from RugDoc and other useful things on here. And the final place that's really good to find new launches is the ecosystem-specific Twitter and YouTube accounts, or Discords or Telegrams if you're into that. But YouTube and Twitter has some good info too. And you want to choose 1 or 2 chains, and you want to really focus on those and become an expert on it, because there's too much going on. You're not going to be able to find every new project, but you could become an expert on Phantom, an expert on AVAX, expert on Cronos, expert on Near, etc. And there's no reason that you couldn't be one of the top 50, top 100 people in the world in terms of your expertise on that chain, maybe even higher. And so, for example, for Cronos, I just found some Cronos specific accounts on Twitter. So I've got Cronos Research, Cronos Chain News, The Chronicle, and you can find some accounts like this, and you can then follow them and follow their updates as they put out new projects, post about new projects that are launching on that chain. For AVAX, for example, there's the AVAX Holic. Because AVAX has gotten so big, this has 70,000 followers. I remember when this one was way, way smaller over the summer. Weekend Avalanche is another good one for Avalanche. But every chain is going to have at least 1 or 2 accounts like this. And it's a great place to find out what new things are launching on that network. And so once you find these new projects to investigate, there's a few things you should look for. And this is by no means comprehensive as far as what to research when you're looking at these projects, but a few things that will keep you from getting totally wrecked. First is you want to know if the project has an audit, and that could be an actual full audit, although right now a lot of auditing firms are backlogged, so it can take a few months to get one of those. But at a minimum, it's always helpful to look at a rug doc review like this one here, and you actually want to click into the audit or review and figure out what it's saying. So this one says medium risk, right? And it has some issues they identified, and it's really helpful to know these things. So that way you don't get blindsided by a risk you had no idea about. Another thing that's always helpful is you just want to try out the app, right? So you want to say, does it offer something unique? And here's Trader Joe, for example. Trader Joe, a lot of people caught this early on when it was the number 2 DEX on Avalanche, and they said this interface is sleek, the app works really well, it's just a pleasure to use, and so people decided that it was worth investing in. Similar things happened with a lot of other DeFi projects that performed well, like Abracadabra before that went down significantly. But that's sort of the second thing. So first we have look at the audit or rug doc review. Second is make sure that it has a working, unique product. And unique could mean that it's unique, period, or it could mean that it's unique for its chain. So, for example, if you're into a certain chain, say you decide you want to be the person for Near, then maybe you want to find the Launchpad or you want to find the DEX for Near. And then the third thing that I'd recommend looking at is you want to check out the tokenomics, right? And there's other details that you probably want to learn about the project, but you want to make sure the tokenomics are somewhat acceptable. And to do that, you usually want to go to the docs. So for example, on Trader Joe, we can scroll down here to the bottom and we see a link to the docs. And most websites will have something like that, either at the bottom or top of the website. And then you go here and you want to find out. Sometimes it'll say tokenomics. Sometimes you have to do some digging. Here, if we go to staking, we can see how you can use Joe for what the utility is, and then some other things you'll want to look at are what the rate of inflation is, so you know if there's a really small circulating supply that it's not gonna your stake isn't gonna get heavily diluted, and you want to know what percentage is controlled by the team, and so on and so forth, and just make sure that those terms are acceptable to you. And once you find these things, then you can start digging deeper, but this will set you ahead of the large majority of crypto investors and put you well on your way to finding some gems. So that's all I got for today. Let me know what you think about these resources and what other resources you're using to find and evaluate new projects. And until next time, this is Dynamo DeFi.